Good afternoon. My name is Amy Peterson. I'm the Project Associate with the Child Abuse Prosecution Project here at the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. APA is a private nonprofit located in Washington, D.C., serving prosecutors as well as their law enforcement and community partners. Thank you for joining our Wednesday Child Abuse Prosecution webinar. Today's webinar, Developing a Kids in Court program, will be presented by Erin Price of the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. This presentation is made possible by a grant received from the Office of Justice Programs through Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. APA is very appreciative of their financial assistance and commitment to improving the justice system. Points of view or opinions in this presentation are those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the views of the United States Department of Justice and the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. By the conclusion of the webinar, you will be emailed a short electronic survey to complete regarding this webinar. If you leave a question in the comment section of the survey, please include your email address so we can respond back to you. This survey helps us continue to provide quality training to you at no cost to your jurisdiction and assist in future planning for continuing legal education. We are in the process of receiving 1 credit of CLE certification from the state of Virginia for this program. Please do not leave the webinar early, as we will use the attendee reports to verify attendance for CLE purposes. During today's webinar, you will be able to submit questions for our speaker using the question box on your GoToWebinar toolbar located on the right side of your screen. If you need additional assistance, please feel free to contact us directly following the presentation. Today's presenter, Erin Price, is the Chief Prosecutor of the Child Abuse Division of the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. She has handled thousands of child, physical, and sexual abuse cases throughout her career and speaks nationally on issues surrounding the investigation and prosecution of crimes against children. In 2015, she received the Bill Walsh Award from the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center for her professional commitment to the field of child abuse. I will now turn it over to our presenter, Erin Price.
Good afternoon. I have to say that for all the topics that I speak on, Kids in Court is my favorite. I often find myself talking about really serious and depressing topics, and Kids in Court is one opportunity that we have in the division in the Dallas County DA's office of really having a good time with kids. We don't get to do that often. Hopefully today what we're going to do in the next hour is talk about what Kids in Court means, the program that has developed here in Dallas County over the last 20+ years. I want you to accept from me that we don't claim ownership in a lot of this. We've learned so much over the years through trial and error about how to develop a good court preparation program for children. Hopefully over the next hour, we're going to talk about the benefits of that program. It's not only to help our kids and our families, but we feel that it also strengthens the partnership and the relationships that we have with the professional partners we rely on to investigate, prosecute, and heal our kiddos. And we're also, during this process, going to talk about challenges, things that we've learned. We've done some things that we don't do anymore because it didn't work out so well for us. And every jurisdiction is going to be unique, and hopefully you're going to get some ideas, and then hopefully share your ideas with me about how we can make our program better. So Kids in Court in Dallas County is just the name of the program that we sponsor in an effort to prepare kids and families who are involved in the justice system. Our program started some years ago through collaboration with a nonprofit organization, the National Council of Jewish Women, and really they kind of instigated it. There were some community volunteers who heard that there were court preparation programs in other parts of the country that didn't exist in Dallas, and so they approached the DA's office about creating one here in Dallas, and that has really developed into what we have today. So it's not just for talking to kids, it's also for talking to families. So it has really evolved a lot over time, and I'm going to talk to you today about that evolution and what it looks like now. If you have tuned in to the webinar today, I don't know that I have to say a whole lot about why we need a Kids in Court or a court preparation program for kids and families. It kind of goes without saying that asking children to get on this stand and talk about their most private, scariest subject matter, the worst times in their lives sometimes, and we want them to take the stand. And I'll tell you what, in Dallas County, sometimes they just drop off school buses of high school children to watch court proceedings. So we can find ourselves from time to time with a courtroom full of spectators who think it's really fascinating to watch other kids squirm on the witness stand. It's very uncomfortable. If you've done this for more than 5 minutes, you know that the defendants in crimes against children are pretty good at filling up our courtrooms with folks who serve no other purpose but to intimidate the child witnesses who are forced to confront their accusers about horrible crimes. And so anything that we can do to lessen the anxiety of that process, I feel like we have a responsibility to do. We use our Kids in Court program not only for testimony preparation, but also to help educate our families about our judicial system. It's a pretty efficient way to get information to a lot of people in a lot of detailed information. I think there's value, too, in kids who see that other kids are going through the same thing they are, that they are not alone in this process. It's going to help them familiarize themselves with the courtroom. They're going to be able to sit on the witness stand in the format that we use, and just kind of hang out in the courtroom at a time where everybody's casual, it's very informal, and they can just kind of see what it's like. You know, the more familiar they are, the more comfortable they're going to be. We invite, through our program, a lot of our community partners to help coordinate and organize our program, and so that frankly gives us a lot of value in some face time with our professionals from our advocacy center. Our therapy staff often participate in our Kids in Court. We have family advocates who are employed by the advocacy center, sort of case manager people who help guide our families through this process. So we have community members that may not necessarily have day-to-day contact with the prosecutors and the investigators, and this kind of helps our families see that we are all on at the same page. So we got started, like I said, more than 20 years ago because some members of our community saw something good that was happening in another place, and we just kind of copied what we saw. I think at that time I was not here then, but I believe what happened is our community volunteers from the National Council of Jewish Women contacted people in other cities who did these programs, and they started asking questions. I think the DA's office and our community volunteers came to the table, kind of identified what resources we had. Initially, our advocacy center was not involved in our Kids in Court program, that it was really driven by the district attorney's office and the National Council of Jewish Women who wanted to fund the program. And then they just got started. You just got to get people here. You just got to send families invitations. And so it was just a matter of putting your feet on the ground and going. So up on your screen now, you'll see a list of the players that we currently involve in our Kids in Court program. You know, the staff of the Dallas DA's office, Child Abuse Division. I have to say, as the supervisor of the Child Abuse Division, I require the prosecutors to attend. We have Kids in Court on Saturdays, and that's a choice. You could do something different in your jurisdiction. But ours happen on Saturdays. We do it 5 times a year. On a Saturday morning, it takes 2 hours from 10 to 12. So I require the prosecutors to go. You know, obviously within reason, there's everybody can't be there every time, but we have 12 trial attorneys who are required to be there so that the families who attend, the kids who attend, know who their person is at the DA's office. So my prosecutors go. We also have victim advocates who are employed by the DA's office. We have 3 victim advocates who currently work with the Child Abuse Division in my office. And so they are required to attend as well. And every child and family has a victim advocate if they have a case with us. And then the investigators that are assigned to the Child Abuse Division at the DA's office are not required to go, but we take a few volunteers because we have learned over time it's nice to have a little security while we're here, because we've kind of had some things. One time, I would say, we had 2 caregivers get into it in the hallway. So now I have an investigator for sure. So those are the members of the DA's office who are present. I also extend the opportunity to other cases. If you've got a kiddo who witnesses an aggravated robbery or for some reason is a witness in a family violence case, we open the doors to those families too. They don't attend very often because it's unusual for prosecutors, in my office anyway, to put kids on the stand if it's not a child abuse case. But any kid that wants to come who might be a witness, we would love to have them. The more the merrier. So the puppy dog at the bottom, that is a dog that belongs to an investigator in the Child Abuse Division. That's Roper. I say he's our therapy dog. He's not really a therapy dog. He's a companion sometimes for kids who come to the office for interviews. He's been in court a couple times, but he's almost always here in our office. So when kiddos come for interviews or court prep, they will see Roper. So we always have Roper at Kids in Court. He's usually the most popular one. You see also the National Council of Jewish Women. We have a long-standing relationship with them, and what they provide for us at our Saturday sessions are community volunteers. Usually usually only 4 or 5 ladies who have committed their volunteer time to this project, and we've had great consistency over the years. It's the same ladies who come back and who are really dedicated to the success of this program, and it's nice to have lots of people to help us. Things come up. Kids need stuff. You got to walk kids to the bathroom, or you got to answer questions or keep them entertained. And as I go through what the process looks like, the volunteers from the National Council of Jewish Women help us implement the program. You also see that one of the players we've begun to use, only in the last couple of years, is BACA, Bikers Against Child Abuse. That's a relationship that we have developed pretty strongly over the last 2 years. They have provided great support and court accompaniment to a lot of our families. Even at the last minute, I can call up BACA and say, this kid doesn't have any support at all. Can you come hang out with them while they're here for court? And our local BACA chapter will send us a group of folks to help out our kiddo feel a little bit stronger. So they come to Kids in Court. Their role is just basically to be present. It's another community resource that we can educate our parents about, or our caretakers or parents, that's available to our kids. We don't push BACA on our families. If they want to become a BACA family, that's up to the individual caregivers. But they participate in Kids in Court and take great pride in the role that they play in our court process. Over the last couple of years, we've also begun including more and more people from our advocacy center. So in Dallas, our advocacy center kind of begins most investigations. That's where the forensic interviews happen for us. At the time of the forensic interview, the family or kiddo is assigned a family advocate. So the family advocates now participate in Kids in Court, and we also have members of our clinical or our therapy staff who participate, and they kind of get divided up. They're available to talk with kids or families who come to Kids in Court. They also provide referrals for us if the therapist has a child on their If a therapist is seeing a child in session and they feel like the child would benefit from Kids in Court, then they are absolutely available. We will absolutely invite that kiddo at the request of their therapist. But most importantly, the most important players in our Kids in Court process in Dallas are our kids and our families, and that's what I've represented at the bottom of the slide. If we don't have kids and families, it's just a bunch of us sitting up here looking at each other. That's not what we want to do at all. And so there's not much involved in the preparation of a program. That, in my opinion, is kind of the beauty of all of this. Once people who are dedicated to the same cause, and in Dallas they're represented on my players slide, once those people get pointed in the right direction, all you got to do is invite kids and their caregivers, and you have a real opportunity to make a difference for them and to provide them a good service. In our jurisdiction, kids get invited only by the district attorney's office. You can send me a referral, but you can't just show up at Kids in Court. You've got to have a pending case with the DA's office. And so the burden, the way we divide the burden, is that it falls upon the prosecutors and their victim advocates to come up with a list. I told you that we have Kids in Court 5 times a year. That seems to be a number that works well for us. So what I encourage the trial prosecutors to do is to look at their upcoming trial dockets and the cases that are set for trial. Between now and the next Kids in Court, those families get invitations to Kids in Court. And so they are both a written invitation, we send them in the mail, and we also make phone calls. So our victim advocates will follow up by the phone call. Occasionally we have families who ask a lot of questions on the front end of a case. Right after the suspect is arrested, they have a whole lot of questions about process. I don't know, you know those families who seem to be more involved early on, and so sometimes I do feel like those families benefit from seeing other families in their same situation, even though their court or their trial date may be a long way off. So sometimes we invite families early in the process, but if your jurisdiction is like mine, our cases travel very slowly through the system. So if your kid comes to Kids in Court right at the time of indictment, but isn't going to go to trial for another 1.5 years, they're not going to remember a lot of the stuff that they learned. So I generally think they benefit more by coming closer in time to their trial date. We've had plenty of kids who have come on more than one occasion, so not that many. The plan is not to invite kids every Saturday to hang out at the courthouse. The goal is for them to come one time and for that to be valuable. But we've certainly had kids who have come more than one time because it was appropriate in that particular situation. So they get invited when we invite them, is the short answer. So the way that Kids in Court works in Dallas is we have it at our criminal courthouse. The goal, we feel like, is to familiarize the kids with the courtroom since they might be testifying in. Most of our courtrooms look the same, so it doesn't really matter which courtroom you go in, but we have 17 district courts here in Dallas. They mostly look the same. So if they've sat in one witness chair, they've probably felt like they've sat in all of them. So we host it at the courthouse on a Saturday morning. We have tried over time, we tried doing an evening session for a while. The attendance was pretty low. It's pretty hard to get people downtown in a big city in the evening when they've got kids who are doing homework and worried about school. But we did try that as an effort to accommodate our families a little bit better, and I felt like attendance was lower then, so we've gone back to doing just Saturdays. We send out our invitations ahead of time. We have a pretty good head count of who's going to come. Every child in the family is invited. It's not just for children who are actual victims or witnesses. But you can bring anybody. We don't want kiddos to feel like they're singled out or create child care issues. So if you have a kiddo, they can all come. In our courthouse, our courtrooms, you got to get on the elevator to get to the courtrooms. And so we all kind of congregate down by the elevators to make it really easy for our families to see what we're doing and who we are. And we've started recently wearing matching T-shirts. Really, the Advocacy Center was kind enough to buy us all T-shirts so that they can tell who works here and who doesn't. So we all just wear matching T-shirts to tell that. But it is casual. It's blue jeans and shorts in the summertime. We don't wear our court suits or anything like that. We want to just play and hang out. And so it takes a while for people to kind of trickle in. I'll tell you, we average somewhere between maybe 25 to 40 kids, a kids in court session. For us, that about fills up a courtroom. You don't have to be that big. We certainly had plenty of sessions that were very small. But, about 25 kids is a pretty good courtroom full of people, 25 kids and their caregivers. It starts to get a little crowded after about 35 in our courtrooms, but that's going to depend on your jurisdiction and what you're comfortable dealing with. And that's child witnesses and siblings. That's all the kids together. So you don't want your courtrooms to be so crowded that you're not getting information to people. So we all come together in one courtroom. So I bring all our volunteers, our Advocacy Center staff, our BACA members, National Council volunteers, DA staff. We all come together in one courtroom, and I have just the way our courtrooms are set up. But we have our professionals kind of on one side, and then the families all sit in the gallery of a courtroom. And we just kind of introduce ourselves, the staff does, in a very casual way. The way I handle it is I do all the talking. Tell the families what we're here to do. It's very important, in my opinion, early on that you let these families and kids know that they're not there to talk about their case. They're there to have fun, they're there to learn a little bit, and they're there to meet some people. Those are our goals. We are not going to talk about your case on a Saturday morning at the courthouse in front of a bunch of people. That's not our goal. And so that usually puts, especially your teenagers, that puts them a lot more at ease because the kiddos can come in there looking pretty anxious about what's about to happen. So I lay it out for them. This is what we're going to do. I let all our volunteers introduce themselves. We thank our volunteers and our staff at the Advocacy Center for helping and doing everything they do. And I want our kids and families to learn faces. Who are their people, their contacts, if they don't know that already. If your office is like our office, we change personnel pretty fast. Prosecutors don't stay in the Child Abuse Division very long compared to other places in the office. Maybe your situation is different, but it is not unusual for a child and a family to have different prosecutors as time passes, just through rotation of staff. So hopefully as we get closer to trial, they're making contact with their representatives at the DA's office. That's what we want to happen. So we all start together, we talk about who we are, we talk about what we're going to do this morning. So what we do is I tell them that we're going to split up and that the little kids get to stay in the courtroom where we are. We don't make the little kids move. The little kids stay in the courtroom where we are, and I put a prosecutor in charge of that room. And then I tell them who that's going to be. And then I kind of have to eyeball the room to see what the cutoff is. Sometimes we have a whole bunch of little kids, and sometimes we have a whole bunch of teenagers. Just sort of depends. I try to get it divided about in half. Sometimes I'll say if they're 12 or older, they're going to go to a different room. Sometimes if I have lots of teenagers, we'll make the age a little higher to try to make the numbers more even. But we separate the bigger kids, the teenagers, the tweeners and the teens. They go to a different courtroom. So I put a different prosecutor in charge of that group. And I'll talk a little bit about how those rooms are different in just a minute. But so little kids stay where they are. Big kids go to another room, and then we separate the parents from the kids entirely. And I tell the kids where the parents are going to be. We always are right across the hall. So the grown-ups get to go in the other room. And I joke in front of the kids that, you know, we're not going to go have any fun. You guys are going to stay here and have fun, and the grown-ups are going to go talk about boring stuff. So that's how that's going to be. And then when it's all over with, we're going to get back together, and we all get to eat pizza. And then we're done. We're all going to go home. So they all, you know, I don't ever have trouble separating the kids from the parents, which is always interesting to me, but we don't ever have a problem doing that. And it's not separated very far, but they are very different talks. And so then we split. I have Roper, our therapy dog. Roper does some tricks before we all split up, and they think that's great. So we introduce him to Roper during that part. So then we separate. So in the little kids' room, we start with a video. There are a lot of videos out there. If you go to YouTube and look up court preparation, or I think if you even put kids in court, there's some things that are out in the world. We actually had a video made, it looks like it was in about 1975, but by the National Council of Jewish Women. We're hoping to make a new video soon for the little kids. And what it is, it's about a 10-minute video. It takes them through the different players in the courtroom. This is the judge and what the judge does, and this is the lawyer, and it does so in a pretty kid-friendly fashion. It's a little outdated, but it's not bad. It's a good way to sort of get things started. So we show them about the 10-minute video in the courtroom, and then we tell the kids what they're going to do. So the little kids get to do role-playing. We put all the extra kids in the jury box. We have a child on the witness stand. We have a child who sits at the prosecutor's table with the lawyer, an actual lawyer. We have a child who sits where a bailiff or a sheriff will sit in our courtroom. We have a child who sits where the court reporter sits. And we have a child who sits at the bench where the judge sits. And so what we do is every child will get to sit at every station. If they don't have a station, they stay in the jury box until it's time to rotate. And so what happens is the kiddo who sits at the prosecutor's table will get to help the real lawyer ask the witness questions. And they are just fun questions. They're questions about what they like to watch on TV, what their favorite ice cream is, where they go to school. Usually we kind of divide the time up so that every kiddo gets to say something, but it usually comes out to about 4 or 5, well, about 4 minutes a kid usually is what we do. And so they're just fun questions. It's just so they can sit there and talk in the microphone. So you don't, you know, I would advise you not to talk a lot about their families because, you know, who they came with can sometimes be fraught with disaster. Who they live with can sometimes be fraught with disaster. You just want to talk about only very safe topics. And it always turns to food if they like to eat pizza, because we do serve pizza at the end. What their favorite kind of pizza is, what they like on TV, what they like to do for fun, those kinds of things. But let them talk. We try always to ask every kid a question where the answer is, I don't know. So, you know, our kind of stock question for that is, what did I have for breakfast this morning? Just so a kid can say, I don't know, and we can talk to them about, you know, don't answer questions that you don't know and don't guess about stuff. But basically what we want them to take away from that exercise is comfort, and they appreciate how important it is that they tell the truth. When they leave, they should all know the most important thing about sitting in the witness stand is to tell the truth. And so that's what we want to do. So every kid gets to be, sometimes the a little bit older kids can ask the questions themselves, but most of the time we just have them whisper in the lawyer's ear and let the lawyer ask the questions, because frankly we're afraid of the questions that the kids are going to ask each other, but they can give advice. Then kiddo on the witness stand is obviously answering the questions. We have a child who sits at the judge's bench. We have a robe that we purchased a long time ago, and so he or she gets to wear the robe and hold the gavel, and so they get to start every session with the witness and the lawyer. And we do not have anybody sit where the defendant sits or where a defense attorney sits. We feel like we just sort of stay silent on that topic because we're not going to talk about that. We will talk about it individually with a child when we talk about court preparation, but at Kids in Court we stay away from those things. So the child who is playing the role of the judge gets to wear the robe and gets to hold the gavel. We also have a Polaroid camera where we take their picture dressed like the judge. They think that's pretty cool. That way they can take their picture home with them dressed like the judge. And then the child who sits where the sheriff or the bailiff sits, we feel like that's important to point out to them so that they know they're safe and they're protected. At Kids in Court, they receive just a little plastic badge for being the sheriff. And one child sits where the court reporter sits. And so we have somebody, one of the volunteers, sits and explains to that child what the court reporter does. And you have to talk nice and loud so the court reporter can take down what you're saying, just so they get an idea of what's happening. And so it moves pretty fast through the little kids' room. It's kind of fun and silly, and they usually have a really good time. On the next slide, what you'll see is it's a graphic that one of the victim advocates made up, and it's just an envelope. She got some clip art on the internet, and we made little folders that we print out, and their Polaroid picture goes inside of it. And that's what they get to take home from Kids in Court, just their Polaroid dressed as the judge. We have over time learned that separating the big kids from the little kids works a lot better. The teenager room is kind of a hybrid of educating those kiddos about what a courtroom looks like, but we usually don't do the role play that we do like the little kids do. They have real questions with real issues that they want answered. And so the teenage talk can be pretty substantive and pretty serious. We had an issue, even in our last Kids in Court, we had, maybe it was 2 sessions ago, but we had a transgender teen come who felt very uncomfortable in front of the other kids, and so we got one of our therapists involved. From that discussion, I'll say, we've decided to include one of our therapists in our teen talk every time. That was something we haven't done before. But we talk real issues with kids. They want to know very similar things to what the parents or the adults want to know. Who can be in the courtroom? What is this going to look like? What am I going to do when I see him? And the teen group probably varies more than any other group. Sometimes they're very serious and sometimes they're very silly. So you've got to have the right people running that room with that group if you choose to do it that way, because they are a challenging crowd. But we cover real substance with them. We talk more, I do want them to sit in the witness stand so that they know what that feels like and talk into the microphone. Just so they know, just so they've sat there. Sometimes they're a little too cool to do it. I've had some kids who want their picture in a judge's robe, just like their sibling got in the little kid room. So we have the ability to do that. Sometimes the big kid thinks that's kind of silly. So you just really got to be able to play that by ear and not talk down to that crowd because they've got real concerns. And we really have let that be more like the parent room, which I'm going to talk to you about in just a second, than the little kid room. And we feel like that's provided a pretty good service to a hard group of kids to talk to. But we want to educate them about what's going to happen. For that group, more than any other, I think it is also helpful for them to see that there are other kids there going through exactly what they're going through. And we talk about the value of therapy with those kids. We want them to hear it from us because we want those kids in therapy. Hopefully, if the family is motivated enough to come to Kids in Court to support these kids. They're also motivated enough to get them into therapy. You never know. Okay, so those are two courtrooms. We got a little kid room and a big kid room. And then we separate the adults. We've actually now, we divide the parents because of our unique jurisdictional issues. A lot of our families are Spanish-speaking, so we do a Spanish-speaking parent talk, and we do an English-speaking parent talk. You may not have that where you are, the need for that, but that has been very successful for us. We tried doing one talk with the translator, and we just felt like separating those because we have the volunteers and the staff to be able to do that. That has made a big difference in the quality of service that we're providing to our non-English speaking parents. But this is where we really talk business. I personally, as the supervisor of the division, I always talk to I do the English parent talk because I don't speak Spanish, but I talk to the English parents, and those groups can go a number of different directions. Sometimes we have very angry parents or caregivers. Sometimes we have very sad parents, but most of the time they really have really legitimate questions about the process. And so it kind of enables us to sit in a room and give the same talk that we might have in a one-on-one meeting, but we can do it to a room full of people. It's a pretty efficient way to get information out there. When we talk to the parents, it's about an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes, depending on how the rest of the morning has gone. But we have, about half the talk is driven by the district attorney's office, that's me, and about half the talk is driven by our clinical director at our advocacy center, really getting across how important therapy is. She also spends a lot of time talking about services that they can provide for the families at the advocacy center, and also what parents should expect. We have a little handout that we give them, is it normal that my child wants to see the perpetrator? Those kinds of things. So if the parent hasn't had any therapy or the kiddo hasn't had any therapy at all, then we can give as much as you can give in a 40-minute overview of therapy, what the family should expect from the child and sort of what normal looks like. We also, that's where we include BACA, our Bikers Against Child Abuse, in our presentation. I don't have the BACA volunteers in the rooms with the kids. My personal opinion is that I don't want the kiddo to put one more thing on mom or dad's plate when, in my opinion, the most important service they can provide for the kid at that moment is therapy. Go to therapy first. If you've gone to therapy, then we can look outside that for what we can do to help your kid. And BACA is one of those resources. But in the right circumstance with the right family, BACA can fill a great role. So I let BACA talk to the parents for about 5 minutes just to talk about who they are and what they do. And then if the parents want to ask more questions, they can do that in a one-on-one situation after the talk is over. But I cover things, I have kind of a general outline. We never follow the outline because we get off answering questions, which is good. I want them to feel like we are there to answer their questions. Often they're frustrated that things have taken too long, and they're frustrated that the perpetrator's out on bond. They're frustrated that their child has to go to trial anyway. They have a lot going on. So the parent talk can be, in my opinion, pretty tricky. Excuse me. So we talk about court. We talk about the plea bargain process. We talk about what happens in the courtroom, who can be in the courtroom, what a trial looks like. I just take them through the timeline of a trial. They all leave there with my direct phone number, so when they're not sure who to call, they can always call me. But our goal before they leave is for them to make sure they have face-to-face contact with their prosecutor and face-to-face contact with their advocate so that they know who to call at the DA's office when they want information. I don't know that we always do the best job at communicating with our families, and so this is a good option, a good opportunity for us to take advantage of the of the program. So the more people we can see and the more people we give confidence that we're working on their behalf, I feel like that goes a long way. Most families leave kids in court feeling like they got something out of it, and so I feel good about that. But you just got to be prepared to take those questions and give them real expectations. When every session ends, I always try to finish my parent talk. I have somebody who helps me kind of watch the clock. But when I finish my parent talk, I try to give just a few minutes so that the parents can go back into the room where the little kids are and see one or two of the kids on the stand. I believe that the parents feel that it's going to cause more anxiety for the kids than it actually causes, and it helps the adults to see the kids on the witness stand. That may not always be the case, but I do try to get my grown-ups out of there in time to see the kids go through an exercise or two. And so what happens then when all the meetings are complete, teen room, kid room, parent room, what I love to see is when everybody kind of breaks up into just individual conversations. You know, they have real questions about their case. They want to talk to their prosecutor. You know, they've just got little questions that they want answered, and so it's just sort of organic. We bring everybody back into the original room where we were. Our volunteers have ordered pizza from Domino's. We've worked with a Domino's pizza group here for the same 20 years, and we get pizzas at a very low cost. And they aren't completely donated, but our volunteers pay for them for us. And so we serve pizza to the kids and the families, and everybody kind of lines up and gets their pizza and their drinks, and small conversations happen from there. Families, you see them talking to members of the therapy staff from the advocacy center or the family advocates or the prosecutors. I mean, that's just kind of how that develops. I'll tell you one thing that we have been really lucky lately is that our family advocates from the Advocacy Center have filled a child care need for us. We'll take all little kids in the little kid room, but if they're nonverbal, there's not really anything we can do with them. It was actually a couple of years ago when we had a teenager who brought her own baby to Kids in Court, who was actually, frankly, the reason that she was even in our system. She was carrying her baby into the teen talk, and it was very distracting to the other kids. And from that point on, we've had somebody around who can hold the babies if we've got too many babies that are distracting to the other people. So we have a child care component, which is usually maybe one or two babies that need to, you know, that we've got some volunteers who can hold on to those babies so that mom can really be engaged and ask questions in the parent talk. So we have somebody kind of around who can help us out with that from the Advocacy Center, and that has really helped us. Who knew that we needed to do that? But we did, and they have filled that need. And so then, you know, it takes from start to finish, we usually take around 2 hours from registration to, you know, pizza and small conversations. We are usually cleaning up by noon on Saturday, and people kind of trickle out. The National Council of Jewish Women is the funding source for us in Dallas, and we are really lucky that they've been so supportive over the years. I'll tell you, Kids in Court doesn't really cost very much, and so the volunteers from our organization are always saying, well, we can get you some more money, and the reality is that, I mean, other than plastic sheriff's badges, Polaroid film, and pizza, it just doesn't cost any money to put this on. And so if you don't have something like this in your jurisdiction, you're probably already thinking about ways to implement it. It will probably look different than what we do, and that's a good thing. You should do what works for you, in my opinion. But you want to think about some things. You want to think about how often to have it. Sometimes, you know, small groups versus large groups, you know, there's pluses and minuses to both of those things. You want to think about a time that works for you. In a big city, a Thursday night was really hard for people, but if, everybody in your county is 20 minutes from your courthouse, maybe that's easier than a Saturday morning. I don't know. Think about who's going to refer the kids. Is your advocacy center going to take the lead on sending invitations, or is it the district attorney's office? For us, it is obviously the DA's office, and we think that's what works for us. Who in your community can help you? That's going to look different for everybody. Where are you going to get all those materials? And so we actually asked, we have an Arts Magnet High School in Dallas, Booker T. Washington High School, Arts Magnet, and the art students put together a booklet for us, a coloring book basically, that we hand out at the end. It just kind of walks your kids through the process. So we send our kids home with a coloring book that students at our local high school made for us. There are some publications by the Victim Witness Division of the Attorney General's office here in Texas that we hand out about testifying in court. We didn't create any of those materials on our own. They are available to us just because we are in the state of Texas. You're going to have something similar wherever you are. So we just have families that lead with a packet of, information and contact information for all the professionals involved. So really what you need to start your own program is just a commitment. You need commitment from the prosecutor's office and anybody else who might help you put this on. That's it. Our volunteers, we have about 4 or 5 of them for every session from our National Council of Jewish Women who help us, but it is not something that you want 30 people showing up to volunteer for. A small group works really well, and it's consistent, so we're happy about that. What you might want, that's just the stuff that we have. You might want to have pizza, you might want a robe and a gavel and a camera and a sheriff's badge, but you certainly don't need any of those things to put together a good court preparation program. You might want a video. I think that kind of is a good icebreaker and a good place to get started. I didn't mention to you that there is we started using for our older kids something I found on YouTube, and I'd give Harris, I think it's the Harris County DA's office, or the Harris County Advocacy Center is what it is. The Children's Advocacy Center in Houston created a court preparation video that has older kids in it that's on YouTube. It's pretty good and is more age appropriate than the 1975 little kid version that we show right now, but it helps the older kids. I'm hoping in the next year that we're going to make our own video. That's a pretty expensive proposition, but I think I've got some folks who are going to help me do that. That is specific to Dallas. You certainly don't have to have that. It is a great icebreaker for your kids. And then there's going to be other things. Y'all are going to think of things that we certainly never thought of, but really just getting families there. Once you get them there, you're going to go with the flow, and it's going to be successful. I've given this talk before, and I got a bunch of phone calls after I gave the talk from prosecutors who were very concerned about what if the defense bar knew that you were doing this, if the defense attorneys were aware that kids were coming down and practicing their testimony, that it was really going to hurt your case. And I can just tell you from experience, all I can offer you, that has really not been the case. Our Kids in Court program has had some publicity. There have been some articles in the Dallas Morning News about our program. I have had defense attorneys question the kids about it, and if your little kids walk out of there saying, I just learned to tell the truth, I don't think that it has ever come back to bite us. I feel like the benefits of information that's provided to your family and the comfort that goes to your kids from sitting in that witness stand certainly outweighs the questions that could be fielded by the defense attorneys. So that has not been our experience after a really long-standing process that I feel like most of the defense bar knows that we do anyway because it's gotten some publicity. we're pretty careful to make sure that we are not giving kids gifts. The National Council of Jewish Women provides them with a Polaroid picture, a pizza lunch, and a plastic sheriff's badge when they leave that day. So, you know, that we're pretty clear that our volunteers are the ones who are serving the pizza. It's not the DA staff. The volunteers are the ones taking and giving the pictures. We try to be real clear that none of that stuff comes from the DA's office, and the reality is it's worth about a nickel. And we want to have good boundaries. You know, a lot of our volunteers want to follow the cases, and they get attached to a kid who comes to Kids in Court, so they want to come see a trial through. And we've been real clear that that is great that they care so much about our kids, but we just want them to focus on volunteering for the program and not worry or get so involved in a particular child or their case that we forget our boundaries. So we're pretty, I'm not going to say we're strict about that. We're just pretty clear on it. So after 22 years, we have expanded our original plan from just having all kids in one courtroom to go through the exercise. We've pulled out our teen group, and that seems to work really well for us. I'm really pleased that we've made that change. Our advocacy center was not involved. We didn't really have therapists or family advocates. They didn't even exist until recently at the advocacy center anyway. But now they are a large part of the service that we can provide families with kids in court. We always have plenty of Spanish-speaking folks here. If we have a child who prefers to testify in Spanish, then we have a volunteer who will translate for them on the witness stand, just like they would if they were in court, so that the child knows what that's going to feel like. We have plenty of Spanish speakers around to help our Spanish-speaking families, and we now talk to the Spanish-speaking parents in a separate place so that they feel like no group is distracting the other one, English or Spanish. So I think we are doing a better job of reaching out to those families. You know, but our program is still not grown up. That's what we say. We can always be better. We can always learn more. We can always change to adapt with the group that shows up. I don't think one Kids in Court session has been identical to any one that came before it. Every group is very different. And as long as our group kind of adapts in the moment, it usually works out really well. One thing that we are not good at in our program is measuring our outcomes. Anybody that writes grants knows how important it is that you're able to measure your outcome. We don't have any way of doing that. It's a struggle for me. I'm not really a researcher. But other than issuing a survey to the families as they're walking out the door, and I sometimes think these people don't need one more piece of paper to fill out. It's kind of hard to measure if people really get something out of what we do. It's all anecdotal for me. I know that they are getting information and that kids are getting comfort and questions answered from this process, but I can't measure it. So we're working with the Research Institute at the Advocacy Center to see if we can't create some outcome measures so that we can show that we're successful. That's not my area of expertise. Our volunteer coordinator with the National Council of Jewish Women is working to prepare an administrative guide. As far as I know, one of those things doesn't exist about how to do your own program. We were hoping to be able to document what we do so that we can share it. We're very proud of our program. We've worked very hard to develop it. And, you know, like I said, of all the things that we do, this is a great fun thing that we get to do with kids and families in our community and the other professionals that we work with every day. And we can continue to identify better resources. There's got to be stuff in the world that we haven't thought of yet. So my volunteer from the National Council of Jewish Women, her name is Judy Hoffman. I'll give you her contact information in a minute. But Judy sent me that picture one day that you see in your PowerPoint, and so that's exactly how she feels about Kids in Court. That we are able to give comfort and information to kids and families, and we feel that it's really successful. We certainly don't think we're finished. So I've asked in my presentation how you feel that we can do it better. If you see something that you feel like, whew, you're going to have a problem with that, or you should consider something that you haven't before, I would love your input. And as I come to the end, here is my contact information. And I put my volunteers' contact information also. She is very giving of her time and expertise as it related to creating this program more than 20 years ago. And so we are happy to answer questions and help you in any way that we can. So good luck to you guys in starting your own programs if you don't have one already. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay, so thank you, Erin. We have a few questions that people have posted. First question is, how do you address client confidentiality when you bring all these kids and their families together in one place?
That's a great question. So we created a registration form just saying, basically saying they're waiving confidentiality, but what I'll tell you is we don't talk substantively about anybody's case anyway, so I guess their identity would technically be confidential. They're just witnesses at the trial. We don't single out who's a victim and who's a witness and who's just a sibling. It's just a room full of kids and families. So we haven't had an issue with that, but that's a great question.
Another question is, do you allow children who have to testify in the family court to participate?
I don't think they know that we do it, to be honest. And in our family courts anyway, it is not that that's where I practice, but I don't believe there's a lot of children testifying in family court in Dallas anyway. Our family court judges are really reluctant, as I understand it, to hear from kids. And so kids are testifying in criminal cases, but not in family court cases. If I were contacted by somebody and asked, I'd certainly consider it. There's not anything that we're hiding.
Okay. Another question is, what about using teens who've previously participated in Kids in Court and testified to help you facilitate the teen group?
That's a really good idea. There's a couple of kids over the years who have done a little bit of public speaking on behalf of the Advocacy Center to talk about their experiences there. You know, I think that's a really good idea. I hesitate to think about the burden that we'd be placing on a kid. They'd have to be a pretty tough kid to be able to go through our process and then come back again. But I think that's a great idea.
Okay. I think that's about it for our questions. Thank you, Erin, for an excellent presentation today. All of our APA webinar materials and recordings are available on our website, www.childabuseprosecution.org. Please join us next month for our April webinar, Defining the Process of Disclosure in Child Sexual Abuse Cases. If you have any questions or concerns, please email us at webinars@apainc.org. Thank you for attending and have a great day.
Thank you.